Hello and welcome to our Update 26 Warlock's Legacy Preview from Lamania on twitch.tv/DDOstream. Don't forget to give us a follow if you would like to be notified for when we are going live with shows just like this one. Hit that follow button and you'll be email notified for all of our shows, and you can find our entire schedule on twitch.tv/DDOstream. This is normally the weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream. We are live every Wednesday starting at noon, but this week we're doing something special. We've got some devs here with us, and we're going to be looking at the Warlock coming in Update 26. As I said, Warlock's Legacy. I am the voice that you are not seeing, and that's because I only have one webcam. And that would be me. That would be Community Manager Cordovan, and I appreciate you guys being here. Let me do some introductions. First up, we have two devs. Vargwheel is here. How you doing?
Howdy.
I know that you've been working quite a bit on the Warlock.
There's been a lot of that going on.
Yep.
It's been a while.
Also working quite a bit on the Warlock is Steel Star. How you doing, Steel?
Doing well. Hey, everybody.
Cool. I should mention quick that Severlin was going to join us, but as some of you may know, he's doing some investigatory work regarding the Galanda server, and he's also doing a little bit of work for those Acheron's Call players out there. We have an issue with Winter Zeb right now, so unfortunately he got pulled away at the last minute and was not able to make our stream here today. But we do have two folks who have Warlock has been their life for a while, so that's good. Just a quick note that normally we're kind of free form on our Q&A here on the live stream, but I wanted to focus our questions, if possible, this time around on the Warlock. We will have time, hopefully, at the end of the session here to just get some general questions if you have any, but if you I would prefer if you guys could ask us questions specifically about the Warlock, because I know we have a lot to talk about. We frankly have already had a pretty busy chat, so let me make sure, see what kind of stuff we already have, huh? Let's see. Well, I guess we'll get to some of that in just a second. So let me start with a basic introduction. I've rolled up a Warlock and made it to level 28. This is on our Lamania public preview server, which you can check out right now. We should note that, as is typical for the preview server, it's not in a finished state. So you'll see some things like you can see here, the icons are off, etc., etc. That stuff will all be won't be going live.
Work is ongoing.
Yeah, work is ongoing. There we go. So, just to start off a little bit, what is the Warlock?
So, basically, a Warlock's an arcane caster. He makes a pact with some kind of great patron, whether it's a fiendish devil or the Fae or a great old one. And they have a really important ability that nobody else has called Eldritch Blast, which is why we talk about them going pew 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 all the time. They basically just blast energy out of their hands all the time. This doesn't cost mana, it's just limited briefly by cooldown. It's really just the animation cycle, so you're throwing tons of Eldritch Blast all the time. They have ways to change their Eldritch Blast. They can turn it into a cone, they can turn it into a chain blast, which has been pretty popular on Lamania so far. And they can have it in a circle around them in their version for one of their trees.
So what you're seeing right now is a little bit of a look at the Eldritch Blast. Let me stay in one place just so you can kind of take a look at that. They will target, similar to what you'd see for ranged, that kind of thing. Like if you're shooting a bow, for example.
Yeah, they're a lot like arrows in some ways.
Yep.
I'm getting shot now.
And it should be, so this is the Warlock's basic attack. In the same way, say a monk maybe uses hand wraps or a fighter uses a sword, the Warlock is using this Eldritch Blast. And the Eldritch Blast comes in various different sort of flavors, as it were. Can we talk a little bit about sort of the options that you'll get for your Eldritch Blast?
So some of the options are related to your pact. If your pact is Fiend, then you get extra fire damage. If your pact is Fae, you get extra sonic damage. If your pact is Great Old One, you get extra acid damage. In the various enhancement trees, there's a bunch of ways to change it around. The basic damage that's not related to your pact defaults to force damage. There are ways to change that to be evil damage, which works on everyone, whether or not you're evil. So that's pretty good against most enemies in case you're fighting a Helmed Horror, for instance. That will be coming useful. There's also ways to... I'm trying to remember the other damage types.
Basically like acid and fire.
Yeah,
there's
there's
also
acid,
an
fire,
underlying
force.
layer
So
of
it's kind of the
force.
packs, which you
Oh, there's piercing. There's there's ways to get other add-ons that can slow enemies.
Right. So at level 1, you get a feat that is your pact, and that adds a certain kind of damage selectable by you that you can turn on and adds to all of your Eldritch Blast. And like Vargwheel said, as you go up in the Enhancement Trees, there are other damage types you can add or convert the base damage to, as well as the different shapes.
Right, and that's sort of what you're seeing on the hotbar here. I tried to, show some of the different options. Like, for example, this one that you just saw is a chain attack. So what'll happen is you'll use your Eldritch Blast, and similar to, say, Chain Lightning or something, it'll actually target, the one creature and then spread out to anyone else within the area. There's also, say, an Enervating Shadow, which is not entirely working right now on Lamania, so I'm not really using it as much. But it allows a 10% negative level chance, and it sort of acts like a homing thing a little bit as well, right?
Yeah, if you're having trouble aiming because the normal Eldritch Blast flies more or less straight like an arrow, so moving enemies could possibly avoid it, the Enervating Shadow will home in.
Cool. And then there's also another, I guess I should show this form off. This is an Eldritch Aura. The way the Aura works is, well, kind of what you would think, right? So instead of shooting blasts from your hands, you're basically sending an aura out,
Right.
to everyone around you.
The aura is a little bit unique in terms of the Eldritch Blast shapes you can get. It is less controlled by you, is when you have it toggled on, it affects all nearby enemies every couple of seconds, and the number of seconds between ticks of it goes up as you go up one of the enhancement trees. However, unlike all the other Eldritch Blast types, when you have the aura turned on, you can also wield weapons.
Right.
And deal spells instead of having to click the button to fire Eldritch Blasts. So it's good if you want to wield weapons as a warlock. It's good if you want to cast other damaging spells as a warlock, because you're multi-class and have a lot of damage spells, that kind of thing.
And I would imagine, this will be for a bunch of different types of builds, but I would imagine particularly some of our multi-classers and such out there may like the aura because you could still use your weapons and all that. So how do weapons work with the Eldritch Blast? Should I not wield weapons? Can I wield weapons? How does that work?
So you can wield weapons if you're not using the aura. Then the main bonus from your weapons is giving you statistics. So this relates to some questions players were asking as well. So for Eldritch Blast, that replaces your basic auto attack. You basically want spell casting stats. So you want spell power to boost your damage. You want spell criticals and spell critical damage. But the basic weapon you're holding does not directly affect the damage your Eldritch Blast does. It's not, having a greatsword doesn't mean you're doing d12s or anything like that.
Right, so you might want to have a quarterstaff or a scepter and an orb, much like a wizard or sorcerer might.
Right.
But you won't be directly swinging them, and things like on-hit procs, melee attack speed doesn't matter to Eldritch Blast.
Let's talk a little bit about sort of spells, as it were. How does a warlock work with spells?
So warlocks in DDO we're planning on, they have spell points, which we know is somewhat contentious. But they basically get 6 levels of spells. They get a variety of mostly arcane spells, but they also occasionally touch in some divine spells. Warlocks overlap a little bit with that. They generally do not get damaging spells, so they're not going to be like a typical sorcerer or wizard with their SLAs. They're not going to be casting Fireball over and over again or anything like that. Their main source of damage is generally Eldritch Blast, but they have pretty good buff spells for their party, like most arcanes. They can cast Blur and Displacement, that kind of thing. And they have pretty good control and death spells, so they have things like Hold Monster, Charm Person, Finger of Death. Especially the Soul Eater tree is especially good for that one.
And we'll go through the trees and talk a little bit about that in a second. They have a fairly limited selection of spells, if I'm correct. How does that work in terms of, say, leveling up in that for spell choices?
Right, so across their 6 spell levels, you will only ever get to pick 2 spells per level. So they have a decent selection of spells, but they're only going to choose from, but they're only going to get to take a couple from each level. That said, depending on what pact you choose, you will gain additional spells related to that pact. So if you choose the Fiend Pact, then you will get a command spell added to your Warlock spellbook, and you'll get the Binding Chain spell, which is new to players. Monsters have had it in DDO before, but...
Right, which is why you're seeing up to 4 spells per level up there. Those are coming out of...
Right. Tainted Scholar will also give you an addition. As you take the cores in Tainted Scholar, you will get more spells. So this is actually the most spells you can get as a Warlock is 4 per level.
And is there a way to swap spells if you want to?
You can trade spells similar to a sorcerer, where you can go to your trainer and say, I want to swap a spell. That is time limited, just like a sorcerer. You can use Blood of Dragons to make it so that you can swap all of your spells very rapidly for 1 hour. So it's very similar to how sorcerers learn and exchange spells.
Okay. Morgu asks, can I turn my Eldritch Blast into a pony? I'm sorry. But
we had that, but we had to cut it. It was overpowered.
Yeah, right.
It is possible, if you're using Double Rainbow, that your Eldritch Blast could suddenly turn into a squirrel or something like that. That has been known to happen.
Did we answer the question in chat? I'm sorry, I was busy playing here a little bit. Bonnie Bu asks, do metamagic feats affect Eldritch Blast?
So, generally speaking, metamagics do not affect Eldritch Blast directly. They do work on the Warlock spells, and they work on most of the Warlock's SLAs in their enhancement trees. So there are still plenty of good reasons to take them, and the enhancement trees have a lot of activated versions of the Eldritch Blast where you can fire, you click another button to fire a cone or a special fireball like Eldritch Blast that flies off and hits lots of things. So those will benefit from metamagics, but not the Eldritch Blast directly.
Okay. One of the other questions related to spells is they have a lot of spell-like abilities. Again, we'll kind of get to more of that in the enhancement trees, but can we talk a little bit about sort of how that all is going to work?
So the spell-like abilities in the enhancement trees are similar in most ways to other enhancement trees that have spell-like abilities. They have things like command, they have some new spells like confusion that you can only get through the Tainted Scholar tree right now. But otherwise, it's their normal spells. You can use metamagics on them without using spell points, like all enhancement spell-like abilities. There's a couple spell-like abilities you get from feats that are related to pacts. So, for instance, at level 15, every pact gives you some activated ability, like Hurl Through Hell is the Fiend one, which is basic. It's sort of an instant kill because the ground swallows up your opponent, and they're in hell now, and they're not coming back.
Probably not.
Or the very popular, the Fey level 15 activated ability is like an Abundant Step, which it turns out a few players have been known to like.
I'm actually going to try to show off mass confusion here. Confusion is something that's frankly fairly new for DDO. How does it work?
So the way confusion works in DDO is, I believe there's a single target and an area of effect one, and monsters that don't save from it and become affected by it become essentially wild. At that point, they're able to attack and be attacked, both you and enemies, so they are kind of on neither side. They clear their entire aggro list, and then they throw up some hate on something nearby. So it means if you're in the middle, and actually I think it's they throw up hate on the first thing they see. So if you're in the middle of fighting a lot of monsters and you throw down confusion, there's a good chance they may still attack you. But if you're far away from a group of monsters and you throw confusion, they're very likely going to fight each other. So it's useful and adds some tactical decisions to how you approach groups of monsters.
Another thing we just saw right here is one of the Stunning Blast abilities. Basically, it's a stun that you use. I'm going to try to stun this person again.
Yeah, it's a ranged Eldritch Blast. It deals your Eldritch Blast damage, so the damage you deal is going to be based on your pact and other options you've taken in enhancement trees and your Warlock level. But otherwise, once it hits, it will just stun an enemy.
Now, do you know if a mob is attacking you while under the confusion, can you use threat reduction, that sort of thing, to get them to attack others?
Possibly, although every couple of seconds they clear their hate list again. So your better shot is actually probably to try and use sneaking or invisibility to hide and get away from them, or crowd control them and then do it. Because when their hate list clears, and it does it every, I think, 3 seconds or so while they're confused, they are going to re-aggro onto the next thing they see.
Cool. All right, I think we've shown a basic idea of the Warlock here. I thought maybe I'd back out and actually go into the character selection screen and we can talk a little bit about some of your initial considerations in building a Warlock. I guess before I do that, though, let me just take a quick check on our chat room. So, if you can't use metamagics on the Eldritch Blast, how does the Eldritch Blast, say, scale as you get into the higher levels?
Right, so as you take Warlock levels, you will gain improved Eldritch Blast feats that will add to the dice from Eldritch Blast. It'll also scale as you gain more spell power or spell critical profile. If you get spell critical chance, that affects your basic Eldritch Blast and spell critical damage as well.
Alright.
And we're still working on some things that we're probably going to add for Epic to make sure that it continues to work all the way up to level 28 and beyond.
Sure. Cool. And we're just going to go into the character select. They are listed as a spellcaster. You can ignore this sort of kind of thing right now with Warlock. This is sort of a Lamania thing. Like I say, we are kind of in our first stage.
Going
here.
back for a second,
Yep.
if you tap back.
Okay.
There will in the end be a path for Warlocks to take for those that like paths. Just one, I think, though, right?
Right, just one, like the Iconics. Most of the players have said that they are probably going to build their own custom version anyway, but we still wanted to provide one for the players who just want to get in and start playing.
Right.
Yep. All right. So, what would be some of the racial considerations for a Warlock? What are the main stats for a Warlock?
So Charisma's their big thing. That is their casting stat for their spells. It's what drives more spell points. So you definitely want to max Charisma. So if you want, you could be a Drow, and you might not want to be a half orc. Steel Star would probably be a half orc.
Why would you not want to be a half orc? All classes are good for half orc.
Well, I mean, that's right. I mean, one of the things when we're talking about building here is that in many ways the Warlock was made for DDO, and there's no one way to build it.
Right.
There's many ways. So what you're seeing here is just one of what I'm sure will be hundreds of possibilities.
Right, and if you're building an Enlightened Spirit that uses the Aura version of Eldritch Blast and you want to hit things with a big greatsword, then Half Orc Warlock is going to be very good.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me just sort of give myself a couple extra skill points here. So Charisma's their main thing. Constitution.
Don't want
is something
Constitution
everyone
like
needs to
anyone.
worry about.
Constitution, Dexterity are never bad choices on this.
All right, now we're going to look at skills. What are the class skills, and what considerations were put into that?
So the class skills are drawn straight out of 3.5, pen and paper. Let's see if I can remember them off the top of my head, which I might not. But now they're up on screen, so I can cheat. But I know they have 2 social skills, which is Bluff and Intimidate. Those were the ones I was going to get right. They also get Concentration, like all spellcasters, and Jump and Spellcraft, which are actually pretty good ones, and of course Use Magic Device, which they are one of the top 2 classes for Use Magic Device, along with Artificer. So,
one thing, as you know, when I was making this guy yesterday, I was reminded to myself that concentration does not impact Eldritch Blast. You know, even though it is sort of like a spell, and in typical caster format, you may be like, well, I need concentration for when I'm, launching my magic missiles and stuff.
Right.
You don't need to worry about that for Eldritch Blast. Now, of course, you may want it for your other stuff, but
right. Some of the in the enhancement trees, as we said before, there are spell-like abilities that use your Eldritch Blast damage and sort of act like activated Eldritch Blast, and those you would need concentration checks on,
as well as your normal Warlock spellbook.
Right. Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about feats. I know I actually had a question myself about that. When it comes to, say, like handed fighting, weapon fighting, single weapon fighting, all that, does any of that really interface with the Eldritch Blast?
Assuming you're using the basic Eldritch Blast, you generally do not want to be taking weapon feats. Getting haste or two-handed fighting, none of that will affect the damage you do or the speed at which you attack. The basic Eldritch Blasts are evocation spells, basically, so if you want to increase your DC to make it less likely that enemies save against some of the damage.
When you turned the monitor, you turned the camera as well. So
did I?
Cartwheel is now yeah.
So it goes.
Technical difficulties, that's what that's called. Yeah.
So if you want to maximize your damage with your basic Eldritch Blast, you probably want to take evocation feats. Depending what else you want to do with your spells, you may want to take Necromancy or Enchantment. if you want crowd control or death spells. And of course, if you're using the Eldritch Aura and actually wielding weapons, then you're going to want to take weapon lines like anyone else.
Right.
Pro tip, you have Symbol of Death, you have Wail of the Banshee. You may want to up your necromancy if you plan to use this. So, just saying.
Yep, and I think there are a few in the Soul Eater tree, which I don't think has hit Lamania yet. There's a few abilities that use necromancy DCs as well.
All right, so now let's focus on these class feats that we've talked about a little bit ahead of time, or earlier, but we're really going to look at it now. You have 3 choices when you are level 1 Warlock: Fey, Fiend, or Great Old One. Let's start with let's start in reverse order. What is the Great Old One, and what sets it apart from the other 2?
So the Great Old One is the most mysterious of all the possible patrons, really. They could represent someone like Cthulhu, isn't probably the most well-known example of a Great Old One. It's someone who, lore-wise, is just... You're not really even talking to them. They barely know you exist. And yet, somehow you've performed a ritual and formed a pact with them and draw power from them. They get acid damage as their bonus damage. Their saving throw type, so to speak, because each pact has one, is will saves, which means they get bonus will saves, and enemies use will saves to save against the Great Old One's pact damage, the acid damage that they give, for half. The theme of the spells that they give you is charm and control mostly. The Great Old Ones also, their level 15 is Create Thrall, their special ability, their special feat for taking Great Old One. And we intentionally put most of the charm effects into Great Old One. We know some players don't really like charm effects, but for the players that do, this is one of the packs you might be interested in.
All right, and that's what you were seeing earlier in the stream. I had picked Great Old One on that particular character. All right, now let's take a look at the Fiend.
So the Fiend is pretty classic. That's, your typical Hellfire Devil pact. You're selling your soul to the devil, essentially. They get fire as their damage type. Their saving throw bonus is Fortitude, so they're very good at Fortitude saves, and monsters use Fortitude saves to save against that damage. And they get a variety of spells, including they get Command, they get Rage, they get Binding Chains. I'm forgetting some of the other ones. They probably have, and again, all of these things I'm saying are things that we still might work on. We're taking feedback from Lamania. We know some people have had some opinions on the spells that come from packs, so some of that could change.
Sure. All right. And we should mention, since we're looking at the Fiend here, it kind of goes to a question that I know has also brought some discussion in the community, and that is alignment when it comes to Warlock. We have opted not to have alignment restrictions.
There's no alignment restrictions on the class per se.
Yep.
We are planning and still working on getting alignment restrictions on the packs, which is definitely a good thing to mention. So the Fiends you cannot have the Fiend pact if you are good, and you cannot have the Great Old One pact if you are lawful. The Fey pact, which we haven't gotten to yet, doesn't have any alignment restrictions.
Yeah, and that just sort of makes sense. I'm a good guy, but I'm entering a pact with some kind of demon thing, so no. Right. So Fey.
So the Fey are, these are the fairies for anyone who aren't very familiar with DDO lore. They are more whimsical than most. Their damage type is Sonic, which also feeds, sort of ties into Sharati Champion and some other Fey abilities that exist in DDO. Their spells they have pretty good control spells. A lot of them are kind of strange. I know they have I think it's Obscuring Mists is one of their low-level spells that is one of the stranger control spells, but players who know how to use it know how effective it can be. They get things like Otto's Irresistible Dance and Otto's Dancing Ball, because they're Fey, and that's what they do.
You just gotta dance.
And they get the very popular reflex saving throws for themselves, and equally unpopular reflex saving throws that enemies get to use to save against their sonic damage. And of course, that means that monsters that have evasion could potentially save against all of the sonic damage. It's probably worth pointing out that this is only the pact part of the damage that gets the saving throw. The basic damage, which is normally force and is normally more than 50% of the Eldritch Blast damage, has no saving throw. So you're expected to still be able to keep dealing damage no matter what.
Right. It all comes as sort of a balancing piece. I mean, out of the 3 packs, Sonic is probably resisted by the fewest creatures, but on the other hand, you've got evasion to deal with.
Right.
I'm going to guess we may see some Bard phase.
Oh yes.
I expect so, yes.
I've built some really good Bard Warlock multi-class builds internally that use the Fey Pact to very good effect.
So what, any preferences to which one I pick here? Does it really matter?
Oh, take whatever you want.
I'll go with the Fey.
I think the Fey is going to be popular with a lot of players.
Now, here's an example of, say, the first level spells you'll get. You must train one spell of that level, so, you know, up to you which one you want to choose. I'm going to choose Jump, because I like Jump.
Jump is great.
Yeah.
I usually recommend Grease.
Grease.
That's your only first level spell, yes.
Nice. And again, so on this screen, is where this will eventually come into play in regards to alignment.
Right. That is our hope, that we get the tech. It's a little weird because this is the first time we have a character creation feat that restricts your alignment instead of the other way around. So some of that we're still investigating.
Sure. All right, let me take a pause while we're loading into the chat here, see if we have any questions we should ask.
There was a good one asking about arcane spell failure and armor. Okay. Warlocks, by default, get light armor proficiency and don't incur spell failure while in light armor. Through the Enlightened Spirit Enhancement Tree, they can also get the same thing for medium armor, where they can be proficient with it and not incur arcane spell failure while wearing it.
It may be worth pointing out that this is not working on Lamagna right now for the light armor, so...
Oh. Okay.
It's working for the medium armor, but not the light armor.
This is just a now thing on Lamagna, though. I guess I could have probably mentioned here, we're actually planning to do an update to Lamagna perhaps as soon as late this week. And we'll have more information on that soon. Siohoni asks, I think, or Siohon, says, will there be a half-elf warlock dilettante feat?
We are planning on one. We have not finished designing it yet. So, yes, we are aware that half-elf should get a warlock dilettante.
Stevis91 says, can we use XP stones when the warlock arrives? The answer to that is yes. We are not doing any of the kind of... leveling restrictions, TR restrictions and such that maybe we've seen in some past classes. So you can LR, you can TR, you can use auto stones, you can just sort of do what you would normally want to do. We're removing the restrictions this time, really just so that, based on the community's feedback, that, hey, we just kind of want to play the guy the way we want to play, and so we're cool with that. So, yeah. Let's see, what else we got? I suppose we could ask, because I know this isn't on the Lamagna yet, probably one of the most frequent questions I've seen in the forums. Muller Brockman says, what is going to be the past life feat?
So, the Warlock's passive past life feat that stacks up to 3 times is +3 magical resistance rating, which so far feedback has been pretty good on. Players seem pretty happy with it. And tentatively, their active past life feat is going to be a form of Eldritch Ball, which is a sort of fireball like Eldritch Blast that just deals damage in an area. Some of that is still tentative, where players were not all completely excited about it. We're not completely excited about it, so we'll see where that goes.
Yeah,
cool. Cardius asks, when is the second build with Soul Eater coming? Are there any plans of bumping up the speed of Enervating Shadow? I guess, do you know about the Enervating Shadow question?
So we are looking at some of the movements, the projectile speed, I guess, the missile speed of the various Eldritch Blasts. We're probably going to be increasing most of them. And definitely Enervating Shadow. We know that you probably shouldn't be able to outrun it.
What about Eldritch Blast specific gear? I know that in some ways, as we were mentioning, things that improve your evocation would be useful. Certainly things that improve. Well, I don't know what else.
So I would say with Update 26, unlikely, especially because there is not a content pack coming immediately with the Warlock release.
Right.
However, there's, as we've said before, there's a lot of good caster gear that that wizards and sorcerers currently use that will work very, very well for making your Warlock
right.
good.
If you're a fiend packed Warlock, you're probably going to want force damage, spell power, force criticals, and the same for fire because you have the fire damage from the fiends. So there's plenty of stuff you're still going to want that's already in the game.
Have we addressed the spell power question?
I'm sorry, not sure what the spell power question is.
Does spell power impact Eldritch Blast?
Yes, spell power absolutely impacts Eldritch Blast.
Yes.
It is
in all forms.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The various kinds of Eldritch Blast may scale differently with spell power as a balance measure. So, the cone or the cone form that you can just cast over and over again, and the chain blast are probably going to do somewhat less damage to each monster than the single target one.
Cool. Let's see. I guess we could talk about the enhancement trees in just a little bit. I just thought I'd kind of re-show off the Eldritch Blast for those who maybe missed the first few minutes of the stream. This is this is actually the Fiend Pact. Yeah.
Right.
So, and then there's the Aura and Howl of Terror. That's kind of cool. I forgot about that.
Oh, right. Howl of Terror is the Fiend high-level spell that they get added to their spellbook, which is only in the game for druids in wolf form so far.
Yeah. All right. Actually, you know what? Maybe I should back out here and let's take a look at the enhancement trees. Right now on Lamania, we only have 2 of the enhancement trees available, but we're going to have a third one here. I logged out instead of recalled out. Nice. But so we're going to have the Soul Eater coming soonish, right?
Soonish. Hopefully, whenever we get the next Lamania build out, which again is probably within the next week.
Yep. Someone just is mentioning it. I've seen a couple of comments about my hit points here. I'm not using hit points really because I'm on an admin, so I'm just kind of standing around and what have you.
It also is worth pointing out there is a bug on Lamania that we're looking at right now where they're only getting D4 hit dice for their class level, and it's supposed to be D6. That's been fixed internally, but Lamania, you have fewer hit points.
Yeah, so don't worry about my hit points. I'm just sitting here on an admin doing my admin thing. All right, let's take a look at the trees here. And again, like I say, this is in a particularly early state, as you can see. We don't have the icons in and such, so kind of just have to bear with us here a little bit on that. But why don't we start maybe with the Tainted Scholar?
Sure. So the Tainted Scholar focuses around Eldritch Blast and changing ways to use Eldritch Blast, and also around spellcasting more than the other trees. So they get additional spells added to their spellbook. They get things like Confusion and Mass Confusion. I think that's more or less the highlights. They get a lot of Eldritch Blast stuff. They also work around this concept of depravity, so their abilities don't use spell points, but as soon as you take the first core, you can start building up depravity, which is a counter when you hit things with Eldritch Blast. You will get more depravity. You will get it. There's a cooldown on gaining depravity that gets shorter and shorter the more core abilities you have. And the very first ability, Tainted Spellcasting, you can drag onto your hotbar, and once you have, I think, 10 depravity, you can activate it to get +2 to your DCs and I think 25 spell power. So even just at level 1, it's a button that should be useful to you and give you a nice boost in the middle of combat. And depravity is used to power most of the abilities in this tree, including things like the command spell, the confusion spells, Eldritch Ball on their tier 5. So that is their replacement for other options. Trying to remember what. Staunch is their third core ability, and it's gotten a pretty good reception, I think, so far. It gives you 50% of your hit points as temporary hit points, but costs you 3% of your maximum hit points until you rest. So you're sort of paying a blood price to gain temporary power. And that's it's actually one of the main ways that they can stay alive in heroic levels, for sure. And that players have reported that it's worked pretty well for that. Mm-hmm. In addition, the one we're looking at right now is Feign Health, which when you cast spells on yourself or allies, you give out temporary hit points as a proportion of your charisma.
Which
that will help. Yeah, it's actually, at low levels, that's actually very, very strong. I enjoyed the player who found the false life combo of just casting false life on yourself to get temporary hit points and getting more temporary hit points from Feign Health. And then if you really need them, you can hit Staunch, so you have 3 completely separate sources of temporary hit points to keep yourself up and going.
And as you can see here, a lot of you'll be picking up a fair number of spells as you're going through your enhancement trees here. We saw that in the cores, as we kind of mentioned, with Crushing Despair, Death Ward, Greater Heroism, Energy Drain. Here's Command. Here's that Stunning Blast that I was using earlier. Then Confusion and Mass Confusion, in Tainted Scholar
and
here.
So let's talk a little bit about the Eldritch Blast options as well. So in between Confusion and Mass Confusion is, I think, Bewitching Blast, which basically your normal Eldritch Blast, whenever you hit enemies, there's a chance that you will confuse them. So just running along, enemies might start fighting each other because you're hitting them with Eldritch Blast. Along the left side is, I think it's currently named Utter Dark Blast. Some of the names have changed, so I have to remember the ones we're currently using. Utter Dark Blast, which basically changes your damage type to evil. This is intentionally low in the tree to be able to change from force your base damage type to evil, so that anyone can deal with Helmed Horrors or anything else in the future that you run into that has force damage as a problem with, basically.
Which you won't meet for 20
And it also
seconds.
is boosted by alignment-based spell power. So if I had, say, the Fiend, which is doing, say, basic fire damage, and then Sonic, and, say, this Evil, would the spell power of all three essentially accumulate up?
It is intended to be that each damage type is boosted by its appropriate spell power. So the evil part of the damage will be boosted by alignment spell power, which is normally light. So when you take light spell power, you get alignment spell power with that, basically. The one above that is Faltering Blast, which is interesting because players either love it or ignore it and think that the other ones are better, which is great as far as I'm concerned, when players are arguing over which one's the best. Faltering Blast gives all of your Eldritch Blasts a chance to significantly slow enemies. So this is great if you just want to kite, if you want to run around. I know that with the Chain Blast, you have a chance to slow multiple enemies every time. So if you want to just run around and stay alive, this is probably the Eldritch Essence that you want to apply to your Eldritch Blast. And above that one is Penetrating Blast, which is another damage type option that gives you Piercing. So that's a physical damage type, which you might sometimes want. And when you're using that, it also gives you another die for your Eldritch Blast, so it just makes your Eldritch Blast stronger, which is partially because it's at the end of the chain, so you've made a lot of investment at that point.
We have a question from Bonnie about Stunning Blast. What is the DC of it? The DC is listed here as DC 10 plus Warlock level plus your Charisma modifier, and that's against a Fortitude save.
Right, so it's similar to most spellcasting, really.
Let's see, what else? So we've got, if you're into Heighten, we have one to lower that.
Right,
so
we've got
the
Efficient Heighten.
Confusion. Like I say, up at this tree, it's the Strong Pact. You basically are just adding damage to your Eldritch Blast.
Yeah, so the Strong Pact, there's 4 of those as you go up the tree, and they just add more pact damage every time you take them. This is very similar to melee or range trees that have that vertical line of, I just want to deal more damage, which that's what it's there for.
And, we have I picked Charisma on this build. It's Intelligence Charisma?
Yeah, it's Intelligence will support certain builds, and is also a sort of flavor thing for Tainted Scholar, fits in there.
Do you know how that works with Harper? For 2-hit damage? Will that work?
Because you are basically casting a spell, I believe that the Harper bonuses to Intelligence won't actually affect it.
Okay. All right. Let's see. The Eldritch Ball, you guys already saw that on when we were playing a little bit earlier. It's basically an AoE blast damage. And then the other one is +1 to all spell DCs.
Right, so that's worth pointing out. So for players who want to use crowd control or death spells, Tainted Scholar has support for that. Soul Eater also has more support for death spells. There's, I think, 2 of the cores, the Tainted Lore, give you bonus to all your DCs, and this one gives another one, and you also, the Capstone gives you +4 Charisma. So some of this might sound like a lot to some players, but this is also because there's only 6 spell levels. So they're basically their top level spells that are heightened are behind wizards, for instance, or sorcerers. So we gave them extra DC bonuses to try to help them keep up.
All right, let's head on over to the Enlightened Spirit, unless we have any kind of final thoughts on Tainted Scholar.
Unless there's specific questions for Tainted Scholar, no.
All right, and we'll get to some of the other chat questions here in a second. So let's look at Enlightened Spirit. What is an Enlightened Spirit?
All right, so an Enlightened Spirit is a warlock that has sort of turned away from dark paths and committed itself to sort of goodness and light, if you will. Unlike a lot of other warlocks, as we've said before, they get the Eldritch Aura, which hits all enemies nearby automatically over time and allows you to wield weapons as you go. They also, compared to other warlocks, they are better at being in close quarters combat because of the aura and because of the large number of defensive bonuses they get. Throughout the tree, you see a lot of benefits that benefit yourself as well as other allies nearby, or your summons, or all of the above.
All right, I was just looking at chat here for a second, so let's head back. So the Eldritch Aura, this is really the one that allows you to be in an aura state.
Right. The first core gives you the aura itself. It ticks very slowly at first. Right now, a little too slowly. We're planning to make the initial tick faster, significantly faster. I think it's 8 seconds right now. We're looking to bring it down to 5 or 6, I think. Still talking over the details. But yes, that first core lets you just get the aura shape and be able to use it.
All right, and then it also does, like, say, AoE debuffs and things like that as you go into the
right,
tree.
something to note with the Eldritch Aura. It is an Eldritch Blast, more or less. And so everything that attaches to your Eldritch Blast, such as pack damage, debuffs that might come out of Tainted Scholar or Soul Eater that are when you Eldritch Blast, this happens, those all ride on the aura as well.
This is cool. The top core enhancement, Celestial Spirit. When enabled, you float.
Yes. The floating is a little bit like Pale Master Lich form, a little bit, but with a lot more light and a lot less being undead. You are immune to knockdown attacks, and you get a lot of, I believe, light damage to your Eldritch Blast.
Yeah, 3d6 light damage, and then you also get melee ranged and universal spell power.
Yes.
Yep.
So extra damage to your attacks and your spells and all that kind of thing.
All right, let's quick go over Tier 1 here. Got an extra physical resistance rating. When your aura is active, you and nearby allies get a bonus to AC, and we're just going to kind of pop up the tree here. When your aura is active for the second tier, you'll get 10 PRR. In addition, you and nearby allies will get a +1 determination bonus to PRR. So basically what you're looking at, I think a lot in Enlightened Spirit is it safe to call it a bit of a buff tree?
It is a little bit. Those buffs all come to allies that are nearby, more or less. Mm-hmm. So it's good for close quarters combat and keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. There is a lot of PRR and MRR in this tree. I think more than any other enhancement tree in the game, by a pretty decent margin.
Cool. Brutality. What's this?
Brutality is something right now that I think in this form only is in the half-orc tree right now. You can get extra hate from your attacks, as well as extra hate, if you so choose, from your cast spells. So if you wanted to be a spell tank, this might actually be the tree for you.
Right. Which would affect things like the Aura Eldritch Blast itself as magical damage. So.
Right.
Cool. All right, Tier 2 here is action boost defense, pretty similar to what you'd find elsewhere. Shield, hey, this one's kind of useful.
Right.
You permanently gain the effects of the shield spell.
Yep. It's pretty basic, but it does what it does, and it's not a bad thing, especially if you're not wielding a shield. So.
And for those who don't know, one of the nice benefits of shield is protection from magic missiles. So, yeah, just saying. Power of Enlightenment. What are we seeing? Looking at
Power of
here?
Enlightenment grants you your choice of either a pretty decent chunk of light or positive spell power. Light spell power, you are getting a couple places in the tree added to your Eldritch Blasts, so that'll help with that. Positive is if instead of getting your damage out of the spells, you wanted to be able to heal yourself a little better, there's that choice as well. And both cases grant you a little bit of universal spell power too, so all of your Eldritch Blast damage goes up.
In Tier 2 here we have Resist Energies. Basically gives you an enhancement bonus with the... against that kind of stuff.
This is an SLA that resembles the Resist Energy spell, except it casts all 5 types of Resist Energy at the same time on a single target, and it's more expensive than it's right now spell point-wise than it's going to be in the end result. So in the end, it will be cheaper and faster to cast if you were planning to cast all 5 versions of Resist Energy.
Cool. All right, moving up to the next one, Eldritch Burst. It fires your Eldritch Blast in an AoE centered on you. Basically, they'll take light damage that scales with spell power plus any other effects that impact your Eldritch Blasts, and it shares a cooldown with Cleave.
Yeah, so this is one of your 2 or 3, I guess if you count the aura itself, big damage abilities in the tree. It hits things in the same range as your aura and does the same damage as your aura plus meta magics plus that extra 3d6 light damage. It shares a cooldown with Cleave, which we know was not popular with some people, but it's sort of to add a little bit of build variety. For those that are in this tree multi-classed from, say, a fighter, your Cleaves might still be better, especially because of things like Legendary Dreadnought. So in that case, you should keep using Cleaves. But for some characters like Eldritch Knights or Melee Artificers or Pure Warlocks, quite possibly, this might actually be stronger than your Cleaves and should come in really handy.
Cool. Besides the whole stat thing about Cleaves, too. Some builds maybe don't support that.
Right.
Let's see, we got the Power of Enlightenment, which we already basically talked about. Fortify Summons. This is interesting. Your summoned creatures, hirelings, and pets will get a bonus to Fortification, Physical Resistance rating, and Magical Resistance rating. And that's just sort of flat out. Right?
Flat out.
Yeah.
So there's a lineup here that you can see, starting with that enhancement and going up to Tier 5, of buffs for your pets, summoned creatures, and hirelings. Warlocks and Pen and Paper occasionally had options they could take for excelling at summoning, and this sort of represents that. So there's some pretty decent buffs for them in here.
Cool. It even gives them dodge and some form of displacement. Here's an interesting one, Medium Armor Proficiency. You get proficiency in Medium Armor, which you don't by default do as a Warlock,
right,
and the ability to cast Arcane spells in Medium Armor without Arcane spell failure.
Right, so Enlightened Spirits, compared to other Warlocks, are a bit tougher and, as we said, a bit more likely to be at the front lines of a fight. So Medium Armor Proficiency and the ability to cast in it made a lot of sense.
Cool. All right, let's take a look at the top tier here. Spirit Blast. It's an AoE centered on you. Basically does a ton of light damage, plus any other effects that happens, and again, shares a cooldown.
So if Eldritch Burst can be likened to Cleave, this can be likened to Great Cleave. It does extra light damage, and it's a big blast of damage when you factor in all of your spell power.
Probably more like Supreme Cleave, really.
Right.
Yeah. The next one, Beacon. When your Eldritch Aura is active, you get plus 10 healing amplification. In addition, you and nearby allies get a plus 10 determination bonus to healing amplification.
Yep, which I don't think we have a determination bonus out there right now, so it
Not
should stack with everything. Everybody heals better when they're near you.
Yeah, that's always a good thing. Break Forth. Calling upon your patron, you convert the space around you into positive energy. You're a positive force.
Right. This is very similar, actually almost identical to the Cleric's positive energy burst that they get in one of their trees. The main difference being this one does not cost spell points, or I think in the Cleric's case, divine channeling charges, but it does have a longer cooldown. It is a big burst of healing for you and nearby people, but you have to wait a long time between uses.
Yep. We already talked about Displace Summon, and then Displacement, just flat out.
Displacement itself as an SLA.
Cool. And then, like I say, we don't have the Soul Eater available. We'll have that soon, and we could talk a little bit more about that. But in general terms, what can we say about the Soul Eater?
So the Soul Eater has more death spells than the other trees. They've got some damage over time effects. So a couple of their major abilities that we're working on are Consume and Stricken. Consume is just a spell that does a damage over time effect on one enemy that can stack up to 3 times. So it's reminiscent of other spells that exist that do that. And Stricken is just marks an enemy, deals damage instantly, and marks an enemy, and lets you debuff that enemy as you hit it with other attacks. It's worth noting that Soul Eater, specifically, most of these abilities work with melee attacks, ranged attacks, and Eldritch Blast. And there's a lot of buffs to Stricken and Consume throughout the tree. So if you consume an enemy and then Stricken an enemy, you can do things like reduce their melee power, range power, and spell power. You can reduce their defenses. They're going to be probably very, very good at killing single targets like bosses. Is something that Soul Eaters are going to excel at.
Cool. All right, let's. We've got a few minutes here. Let's say about 10 minutes or so to answer some questions. So let's see how many we can answer. Yamanir has asked, will a displacement SLA be able to be used on other players or just yourself?
Just yourself, just like the spell. The main advantages of it are that it is cheap, and I don't actually recall if metamagics work on it, but if they did, they'd be free.
Yeah, I believe you can extend it.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Cheap spell points.
Would you consider a Warlock scroll for the quick elemental buffs? I think we've got some UMD users who want that.
We aren't currently planning to make scroll versions of the Enhancement Trees spells. It's something we might think about, but there's no plans right now.
All right.
Yeah. I see one keep popping up about force items. It's true, there are not a lot of good, especially epic, force spellcaster items at the moment other than Rune Arms. That's something we're definitely going to be looking at for the Update 27 items.
Okay. So, for a Boston-based company, Virtual Gib says, I have not heard one thing described as wicked good.
Warlocks are obviously wicked good.
They are wicked good.
They're freaking wicked.
Dunkin'
the
Donuts, the
Warlocks
Celtics, the Red Sox, everything is
Warlocks
wicked good
are
around
wicked
here.
every way you can describe them.
The lack of snow is wicked good.
It is.
Yeah.
Titan asked about dev events on Lamania. Yeah, we're going to have... we'll announce some stuff when we next update Lamania there. Stay tuned for that. Do we have a release date for Update 26? Nothing further to report other than what's in the updated producers letter that Severlin released, a week or so ago. We're targeting basically June, and we're hoping sort of middle-ish of June. But, depends how things go in the coming days here, right? So... Is there anything this class cannot do besides traps?
It's not...
Yep.
It doesn't excel at healing. It can do some of it.
Yeah.
But it's not great at it. It doesn't have many damage spells.
You can't wield Rune Arms.
As some folks mentioned, they don't have Perform.
They don't have
Perform.
As a class.
It is where...
Yep.
Yeah, so some players have brought up the fact that the Fey Pact deals sonic damage, which is tied to Perform. However, Perform still is a charisma skill, rather. So their Perform tends to still be pretty good as long as you're bumping up your charisma, which you really should be doing if you're a warlock.
Yeah. Let's see. Another question. I've seen a couple of these regarding the speed of your Eldritch Blast. How about things like, say, ranged alacrity? I saw another one in here of what's the feat that someone asked about? Sorry about that.
So, in general, feats that affect your ranged attacks or melee attacks are not going to affect your Eldritch Blast directly.
Right.
We have some things in for making you attack faster. Tainted Scholar's level 18 core ability, I believe, makes you attack 10% faster. We're still looking at the speed of the projectile, since it's not always clear what people are asking about. The speed of projectile is probably going to move up a little bit. It's definitely going to move up for Enervating Shadow, which was the slowest of all of them. We are also considering possibilities for other places we might speed that up if it becomes necessary. It's not clear that players will really care about making that projectile move faster, but it's something we could think about. Or implementing something like Eldritch Spear that could increase the range of your Eldritch Blast. So these are all things we're thinking about, but they are not definite. Some of that is going to come out of feedback on Lamania testing.
Yep. The cost for the Warlock. We aren't yet ready to announce a final cost, but it'll be comparable to the other classes we've released recently.
Yeah.
So, basically, if you know basically what we did for kind of Iconics and Druid and all that, it'll be in that range there somewhere. Agerton mentions, I thought the Warlock had some kind of charm spell. You're probably referencing Confusion, which is one that we did talk about a little bit earlier in the stream. It basically allows enemies to either attack each other or attack you. It sort of adds confusion, as you would think. It's a new thing. So.
They do have some other actual direct charm effects, so their spellbook has some charms in it, if you just want to cast charm spells like Charm Person, Charm Monster. And the Great Old One line gives you access to Create Thrall, which is another powerful charm spell. It's their level 15 feat that you get for worshipping a Great Old One. Not worshipping, making a pact with.
Bard's Rock asks, will there be a quest or story to introduce the Warlock to Stormreach? Similar to other classes, no. We don't have direct class-specific stories really in the game there. So.
To be fair, around the time we've done some of the other classes recently,
yeah.
we've done packs that have had themes similar to it. Not with Update 26, but you may see a little bit of Warlock influence on the Update 27.
Yeah. Let's see. Doc Pepper T says Warlock is receiving spell critical damage in Tainted Scholar. Are we going to see a return for spell critical damage for other casters or on other equipment?
We are definitely open to adding more spell critical damage. That is something that we are likely to do in the future, without having specific plans to announce right now.
Which tree had Death Ward? That was
Death Ward is Tainted Scholar,
yeah.
4th core, level 12, I believe.
Yeah, very good. There's someone who's been working on Enhancement Trees. All right, let's see. What else we got here? Got any final questions on Warlock here as we're looking to wrap things up, maybe about the next... Oh, actually, here's an interesting one. Ezaji asks, we're going to be fighting Warlock monsters?
Ooh. I don't think in the short term, no.
Yeah.
At least not one slinging around Eldritch Blasts.
Yeah, you probably won't see them casting Eldritch Blast in the near future.
Yeah. But I would not be surprised if someday you did. Yes.
Maybe someday.
Let's see. What else we got for questions? When will the character copy tool be fixed on Lamania? Soon, potentially as soon as the next Lamania prop. What's the weekly bonus? The weekly bonus that kicks in tomorrow is... Let me try to remember what I said. It was in the Chronicle. I gotta
It is
look
a
that
mystery.
one up. Sorry, I gotta
Mystery
look that
bonus.
one up.
10% mystery bonus to mysteries.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up. It's in the DDO Chronicle if you want to look that up. So, Banshee Kate says right now, this is probably just a Lamania specific thing. The auto attack is not necessarily
Right.
working.
The audio
That's
attack
going to-
isn't working. It is intended to work.
Yeah.
That is something we're still looking into.
Yep.
But you are intended to be able to drag the auto attack feed onto your hotbar and have that keep casting Eldritch Blast.
Yamaniras has the answer. Thank you, DDO Chronicle reader. Double Mysterious Remnant drop. So that doubles the chance for Mysterious Remnants to drop when you kill a champion.
Good.
So, thank you. Alright, I think that'll probably wrap it up here. I really appreciate you guys joining us here for our Update 26 Warlock's Legacy preview. We're looking forward to, like I said, giving you an updated version of this on Lamania very, very soon. And, of course, it'll be live, if all goes well, later this month on the live servers. So stay tuned more for that. Thank you very much, Varkwheel. Thank you very much, Sealstar, for joining us.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
And don't forget to hit that follow button if you would like to be notified for when this show and our other shows are going live on twitch.tv/DDOstream. Join us every Wednesday starting at noon Eastern for the weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream. And you can see our full schedule, which is just about every day, over on twitch.tv/DDOstream as well. We'll be getting this up on YouTube and archiving this on Twitch later this afternoon for those of you who were not able to join us live. Thank you very much for watching, not live. And thank you everyone for joining us in chat. Quick note, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a Turbine Point giveaway when I get back to my desk in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So thank you. All right, folks, we will see you around, and thanks